you for joining this evening. Just give me a little drop me a message in the chat if you can hear me. Wherever that chat is. There we go. Perfect. Hello.
I can hear you okay for what?
Oh, you can hear me okay. Oh, good. Okay, so I can't see any chat messages, so I'm hoping that it will all be fine. Albeit obviously the call will be recorded. So if you can't hear us, then we will be sending out a recording. And what I'm going to do is do a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any burning questions kind of in the middle of all of this today, just again, drop it in the chat and then we'll try and dissect that in more detail at the end. So we're just going to be chatting for 30 minutes or so to explore the pros and cons of veganism and meat eating, as it's such a controversial subject when it comes to health and fertility. And we really wanted to clear up some of those myths around the pros and cons. So I'm going to pass this presentation mostly over to Ilaria, obviously, as she's the resident expert with all things nutrition and diet, to explore those pros and cons in a little more detail.
Okay. So I go. Okay.
You go.
Yeah, well, I don't have a presentation per se, but basically what we have done is just put some of the most common questions together and just try and explain, I guess, both point of views, because as you will see, is not going to be this is the way or this is the way. It's very much again, it's always like looking in the individual, so there will be some points there might point you towards what might work best for you. And yeah, this is just like an overview of the kind of like different ways of eating. Obviously, looking at beyond nutrition, if that is something that people are interested in. Looking at the environmental and ethical impact. That's obviously something that you want to consider. That being said, why are we doing this today in the first place? So, as I said, it is one of the questions that we get a lot, and I've had both vegan clients and clients that eat an omnivore diet, and the question is often comes up like, should I be going vegan, or the other way, should I be including more animal products? And the answer is always like, it depends on you. So there is a lot of like confusion and misinformation about the topic, especially especially if you take any of your advice, or if you're just curious and scrolling through Instagram. I think you see people absolutely pulling apart like the vegan movement, or the other way, like you have people that just feed on like meat and butter and eggs these days, so like an ancestral type of eating. So it can be really polarized. My personal take on it is to try and well, it's difficult because you will have to consider some of your personal values, I guess, but it's anything that is very polarized I try to steer away from, and just work on an approach that is way more balanced where possible. With regards to the vegan diet, first of all, let's define what that is, because obviously, yes, we are excluding animal products, but does that mean that we are focusing on whole foods, or are we just replacing the animal products with a bunch of meat alternatives, all the corn and loads of tofu, loads of like rice, or if you're like vegetarian, so you're still consuming some animal products, you're just relying on cheese, which is, you might be like, what? But it is often the case. Or lots of like, pasta, bread, pizzas, kind of things.
Because that's what I see mostly in clinic is patients coming in saying that they are, on a vegan diet because they've read XYZ and that it is aiding in their health. But when you dissect their food diary in more detail, it becomes really apparent that, again, those whole food animal-based products have been replaced with often processed or genetically modified foods, which has a huge impact on health in a whole different way. So it's almost doing your health a service in one respect and then a disservice in another. And so having clarity over those, what that actually means and what actually is a healthy vegan diet is also really useful.
Yeah, exactly. But it's worth saying, so like processed, so that's more like an ultra processed kind of way of eating. And that is not recommended in any case, whether you follow a vegan or a non-vegan diet, I think. But in regards to vegan, and this has been observed by a recent study, I think it was in The Guardian as well, which is called the NIPPER study. And they looked, obviously they didn't go into much depth, looking at what the women exactly were eating, but they were on like a vegetarian or a vegan diet, and they observed that women that were on there was a prevalence of, sorry if you hear Isaac in the background. Anyway, there seems to be now a prevalence of nutritional deficiencies in women that are just, in the like leading to conception, and that obviously increases after concept, like after birth, because pregnancy is quite a nutrient depleting, shall we say, process. Because obviously the baby relies solemnly on the mom's nutrient stores and through on a diet intake for them to grow, thrive, and get born.
Do you feel like then that women are getting the nutrients that they need, or do you feel like they can get the nutrients that they need through a vegan diet to be able to optimize their fertile potential, but also maintain a healthy pregnancy and maintain a health post-birth as well? Because I think that's so important that we look just beyond the conception and the pregnancy as well, and look at the health of you as a mother moving forwards as well.
Yeah. So I think it is possible because there are women that do exactly that, and they manage to have really good pregnancy, no difficulties getting pregnant, and then no difficulties restoring or replenishing their nutrient status after birth. However, the con, or like the disadvantage of that, is that it does require a lot more planning, but like thinking when it comes to preparing your food, and there will always, in my opinion, if I were to work with someone, there will always be a need for supplementation of certain nutrients. This study in particular highlighted that the nutrients that seem to be lower and that worsen with women being not even vegan, vegetarian, were vitamins of the B group. So this, I think, it were B2, B12, B9, and B6.
Just to clarify, B9 is that methylfolate. So it's that thing, obviously, when everyone's prescribed folic acid, when you're trying to conceive, when we talk about BVITs and how important they are when it comes to fertility and conception, one of those being B9 is that folic acid or methylfolate in its natural bio form. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that so people realized how important those BVITs were.
Absolutely. So the B vitamins were I mean, they are essential on a day-to-day basis, but even more so when we get to even like thinking about preparing for conception. And together with that, there was also vitamin D, which obviously was observed to be low in this group. So obviously that posed a need or like an attention for a need for supplementation in women that decide to follow a vegan, vegetarian diet, because you won't be, so B12 we cannot get from plant foods at all. I think our mitochondria like metabolites a bit, but it's in very, very small levels, and we need B12 for adequate nervous system function. If you become deficient for an extended period of time, the damage is actually irreversible. So it's something that if you choose to go on a vegan diet, you need to supplement like immediately. I don't want to create a sense of urgency, but it's really, really important that you do so. Yeah. And B9 as well, because it's needed for just like the build-up, so like the genetic material for the baby to develop from the egg to the embryo, etc. And that's also needed for like to avoid the risk for the baby of developing neurotube defects as well, which obviously becomes like yeah, something you just want to avoid. But something that I was going to say, when in regards to like it kind of links to what I was saying earlier, if you're considering a vegan diet, there are certain groups of people that might be maybe just if you're considering, maybe it's worth not trying at all. And people I was will be, for example, women that have PCOS, because they have. So first of all, on a vegan diet, it's more difficult to get protein as well. With PCOS, we know that it is. We see like an hormonal imbalance, but it's more than that. It's like a metabolic. That there is a metabolic like aspect to it. And protein is really needed for that blood sugar balance, and that has a knock-on effect on hormone balance, and that obviously has a knock-on effect on ovulation and reproductive health. They are also at an increased need for B9, so that folate that Kim said. We actually often see that women that have like a piece that present with like some of the PCOS symptoms, so those would be size, periods being irregular, they often have a need for folate, and they will be put on like a higher amount of folate. So that would often be the 5 milligrams, I think it is, instead of the standard dose of 400 micrograms. Yeah. And that's because women with PCOS tend to have a lot of inflammation and homocysteine, and it's actually been shown that the B9 brings it down.
That's so interesting, because again, they're things that aren't regularly spoken about in when you go to your GP or this and the other, particularly when you're diagnosed with PCOS, within the NHS, there's a very succinct protocol that you go through from a treatment mechanism, and then obviously with fertility treatment thereafter. And never is that spoken about. How significantly those types of things would benefit you in that particular instance.
Yeah.
I would imagine if that's the case, because that presents similarly then to endo, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about endo, again, it's because of the inflammation, is also quite a nutrient, again, quite it eats up quite a lot of the nutrients that you would intake. So even with that, it would be although maybe with endo I would go more that's a difficult one, because for some women actually reducing the amount of red meat, for example, which can be some type for some people like pro-inflammatory in high amounts, could be beneficial. So again, be a use of meat as a supplement, which is something that we often say, but not like up to a certain extent. But definitely there will be separate considerations with that. Estrogen is part of the picture there, so reducing some of those sources that can come with food, that being meat, being dairy, can also help, and increasing like the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory foods.
If you were to suggest then, with meats, red meat being pro-inflammatory, any other protein sources that are perhaps vegan friendly, or veggie friendly, what would you usually suggest those to be? Just bearing in mind, obviously, all the pesticides, toxins, etc.
Yeah, okay. So if we're talking purely vegan, then I would often include, and I include this regardless of whether someone is vegan or not. But looking at things like your legumes and pulses, so your beans, lentils, chickpeas. I don't have a problem with soybeans, so like edamame beans, as long as they are non-GMO. Tofu is the same again, but I wouldn't recommend like high amounts ever.
What would you
And
consider
again, it has to be non-GMO.
just so that people are aware?
Oof. So I wouldn't say. I would say I eat. I was actually reading it today. I think the equivalent was 60 grams of soy protein. That's where that would have to be every day for a period of like a month or longer. So that's when you start seeing problems. But I would generally say try your protein source regardless. So if you want to keep it to like twice a week stops, I wouldn't more than that. And it's usually, if you look at a tofu, like what is it called? It's like the firm tofu kind.
Yeah, I
I
know what
was
you mean.
yeah, I can't. I think I think of the name. That would be, I believe, is like a third of the block, so that would be a portion.
Mhm. Okay, twice a week,
Reference.
sure.
Yeah, no more than that. I would say no more than that. And I mean that decreases if you can avoid other sources of soy. So things like I said, your corn, because they will probably be the GMO kind, which is what we want to avoid. So I'm talking purely tofu, no other
Yeah.
products.
How about soy milk? Just out of interest.
Not a fan.
Yeah. I mean, I
No.
know it tastes gross, but from
No,
a
I would
health
say
perspective on the subject of soy.
I would say avoid where you can. And I always think, again, try and include more of the whole foods where you can. So with that, you will also get some of the fiber, for example. But there's not really much nutrition, aside maybe from a bit of calcium in the soy milk. No.
Okay, good. Good to
So
clear
I
that.
would say no.
And how would people identify GMO?
So there will be a stamp or like somewhere on the packet, it will say that it should be organic, and that usually means that is non-GMO because of the standards that have been put in place.
Okay. So I guess that leads us on to a topic that I'm quite passionate about, and I know that you are too, but the differences. So if you are doing the vegetarian vegan diet, obviously your intake of those types of vegetables and crops and stuff will be much greater than potentially than on a meat-based diet. But it comes then into question the quality of certain foods, veggies, fruits, grains. So for example, what's the difference between organic and GMO and the health implications that could impact fertility?
Yeah, so well, I mean, first thing I can think of is obviously endocrine disruptors. So any chemicals or I'm losing my words today, any chemicals that's being sprayed on the food, on the vegetables, the fruit, the legume, that's it's basically used to aid in its growth. But so it will make it look like really nice because there's no bugs attacking it, but actually from a nutrient perspective, it is quite depleted, so it doesn't retain much of the vitamins, the minerals that a known or like an organic, non-treated version of the same food would have. With that, I'm gonna a quick note on soil quality as well, because usually when we look at somewhere that's been grown organically, there will also often be more attention to the soil, to the quality of the soil, which is where the nutrients are basically, and where the vegetable, the fruit uptake their own nutrients. So with that, by choosing organic, we are decreasing our exposure to these environmental toxins. So endocrine disruptors being chemicals that act like hormones, and they often refer to xenoestrogens because they have this estrogen mimicking effect. In a world where we are we have exposures from all around us, because it's not just in the food, is in a lot of like beauty products, personal care products, cleaning products, is in the water that we drink. Where we can decrease our exposure, and one of the ways is by choosing organic foods.
Yeah,
it can be expensive. We often point people towards this great resource, which is the Clean 15 and 30,000, which basically gives you two separate lists. And this is released annually. So each year they basically get different foods, and the foods that have been shown to retain more of the pesticides upon peak. I don't know how you say I don't know how to sing, that's the word. Will go under the Dirty Dozen list, and the ones that don't have any levels, like retain levels of these chemicals or very low levels that are safe, go on the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozens ones are the ones that you should be prioritizing, buying organic where you can. The Clean 15 ones are the ones that you can usually just buy regular.
so I'm going to pop that link in the chat as well so that you know where to access that information, because it changes year on year. So it's really good to keep up to date with that. But for reference, I've got it in front of me. So the Dirty Dozen for this year with the highest level of pesticides, and therefore then having those endocrine disrupting impacts on our hormones and therefore our fertility. And again, just want to stipulate that any of those types of pesticides are toxins, and they'll have an impact on oxidative stress, so free radicals in the body, and that will have an immune modulating effect, and contribute towards internal inflammation, and that's for both men and women. trying to conceive. So again, that's highlighting how important this is. There's an abundance of research out there. All of that information will be on this particular website. So I'll drop that in the thing. But as I said, for your reference, this year, the Dirty Dozen list includes strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, bell peppers, cherries, peaches, pears, celery, and tomatoes. So anyone that's doing those celery juices in the mornings may want to reconsider at least looking at buying organic. And local, obviously, where possible. So British grown, if that's possible. So again, it doesn't have to travel and then be covered with various things that help just preserve the longevity of those vegetables. So it's really, really interesting information on that website. So it's the Environmental Working Group's website.
Yeah, they're coming up with all sorts. The last one I've seen, and I haven't looked much into it, but just from like speaking with colleagues, there's now this A-peel. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's like this wrap. It's not even a wrap. It's like, or at least it's not a wrap that you can actually see. But that's been put on some products, things like avocados, for example, that again is just endocrine disruptor, but it's basically applied to also to foods that we wouldn't, for example, consider buying organics, like the avocados, because they're not on that. But despite that, I mean, everything is aimed to just make the food more appealing, looking nice, but the the impact that it's having on us, just going and picking it up, it can be yeah, it's definitely cumulative. So it's not something that if you do once in a while will have a huge effect, don't worry. But it's definitely something that is affecting and reflecting in the fertility decreasing globally.
Something you mentioned before as well that I really liked and also tell my patients about when they are choosing to be vegan, vegetarian, is using meat as a supplement. And so rather than considering it to be something that, you know, they have daily or whatever, actually utilizing it as something that nourishes our body at specific times in the cycle, that it can again be really great way to replenish our body, and to supplement our body with all those vital B vits, zinc, all those other wonderful things that we can get from meat. That, as I said, at specific times of the cycle that can aid in our fertility. With that in mind, do you recommend a specific time that you might recommend supplementing?
I love I love that you're asking me because you already know the answer. But yeah, it's so we both recommend, if you're someone that's hesitant or doesn't have, a lot of meat and is very particular with the type they have and when to have it. I would say the menstrual phase is when you would want to introduce some of it. And that's just like Kim said, to replenish your B vitamin stores, your iron stores as well, because obviously with blood loss, we lose iron, also for magnesium, for zinc. So there's, yeah, I mean, and I come as someone that, I've been having my own like doubts with meat eating, not eating. But I think I've just come to the conclusion that it will vary depending on the season of your life where you're in. If I was someone that was looking at conceiving right now, I would definitely look and find the best quality of the meat that I can. From animals that have had a good life, that have been brought up in a human way, and just be very specific again with when I would consume it in a way that supports me, rather than something that I just chuck in a pan and not think about it. And yeah.
Yeah. So no on fertility, fertility chats and narratives around meat eating and the benefits, obviously, of the nutrients that we can get from it. So many people recommend bone broth as a great way to be able to get some of those nutrients in. So I'm interested to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because I was going to say, for anyone that's maybe on here, or we'll see this later, that's kind of on the fence, or maybe I'm just reintroducing some animal products. I haven't gone that far as to reintroduce meat, but I'm considering it, or I really don't know where to start. I want to optimize my diet. Bone broth can be a really good way of reintroducing some good quality protein and good quality nutrients, in a way that's not as impacting, like sensorially speaking. But I think it's great. It contains some of that bioavailable protein, as I said. So you got all of your amino acids in there. It's a great source of collagen. I would say yes, absolutely.
And
And
it's something
it's
you can make really, really cheap. You can go get some bones from your
I think
butcher.
yeah, and I think because you're using kind of like it's mainly like bones. Obviously, there will be some meat left over on it. Um, I feel like you're kind of ending the cycle of the animal as well. At least that's how I see it. And it's like products that will otherwise be, because they're not like prime meats. Um, it's like something that I don't know. I feel a lot easier consuming something like that uh, than
And if
actually.
you really struggle with the bones and, the idea of even handling meat, which I know can be an issue for some people, you can buy some really great products now, that's literally just the broth. So they've done all the hard work for you and it tastes really great. I recommend Ossa,
Mhm.
OSSA.
Yeah, yeah.
Think.
Also, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I love them. So quick and easy. You can add it to anything, or you can have it solo. And it really does feel so nourishing on a deep cellular level every time that I consume it. I mean, that's just my personal reflection, but I feel like it's very nourishing.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I've seen like things pro and against. I'm personally pro any something that with clients that are moving from vegan, vegetarian, then consuming some fish or meat is one of the first things that we introduce, because it's often the easiest.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's like you said, like it's organic. There's a brand I've seen as well quite recently, which is called Freya. I think it's quite new. But they're also good. Like, you have good companies providing good products, so you don't even have to get in the kitchen and roast bones and boil bones.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the idea that we've got from this is that there is obviously we're pro-choice, so whatever you choose to do is really your decision, but it's knowing the pros and cons around the decisions that you are making, and therefore then trying to weave in the additional support mechanisms that you need to support those choices that you're making. So as Ilaria mentioned, when it comes to veganism, you are naturally, because you are omitting certain whole foods from your diet, it's really important to make sure that you are supplementing with those vital B vitamins that we need, that's going to aid in that fertile potential, but also your pregnancy and your health of yourself moving forward as a mother as well. And then when it comes to making choices around things like organic and GMO. It's just making sure, again, that you're looking at and being really mindful of those types of food choices that you're buying into. Because often it's the case that these things aren't that obvious. So it's just making sure that you're really clued up with that. It's an extra effort, but if you are making that decision to be vegan, then it's really, really worthwhile to make sure you're supporting your overall general health. And if you feel like you're open to it, there's so much evidence and research around the benefits of the nutrients that you can get from meat and meat-based products, or animal-based products, things like eggs for choline and certain types of meat for vitamin A. Again, really, really important when it comes to that, but it's about being really mindful about when you're having it during your cycle and using it and considering it more of a supplement than a whole food supplement, rather than going to the shop and buying some pill off the counter that contains a whole host of other things that maybe our body doesn't want or need. So making those whole food choices is really nice. And I know that a lot of the evidence, I know you mentioned before, Lara, that a lot of the evidence points towards a more Mediterranean diet. And that's this kind of balance and fusion between the two. So it's not saying it's one way, it's not saying the other, but it's this really nice balance between the two.
Yeah, and it's the way, I don't want to use the word diet, but it is the way of eating that just got the most research to back it up when it comes to like fertility and IVF. And he is very plant focused, which I think is great. So you have a variety of like vegetables, grains, legumes, as unprocessed as possible. So things like your whole grains rather than your white. So don't think pasta, pizza kind of Mediterranean diet. A much more whole food type of eating, with the occasional piece of meat, poultry, eggs, and some dairy as well. Obviously, dairy is one of the things that I often say choose obviously for organic where you can, and fermented because it's so much easier to digest. So things like your kefir and yogurt. But it is something that we assess more like on a base to base, depending on what's going on for the person. But yeah, I just try and steer away from, as I said, anything that's very polarized. We've gone from vegans, that's like juices on salads, lots of raw food, to the polar opposite, which is basically eating liver capsules every morning. It is really, I always say like caution with liver as well, because he is quite high in vitamin A. I wouldn't want to be taking it every single day if I'm preparing for pregnancy or if I'm pregnant. So.
Mm-hmm. So we spoke a little bit about meat and veg, but there's this kind of middle ground with vegetarianism or pescatarianism, where obviously you're integrating lots of fish or lots of dairy, like lots of cheese. So I know that veggies often have lots of cheese, lots of eggs, which can be really beneficial in lots of different ways. But again, have its own sets of pros and cons. So I don't know if you've got anything to say about that.
Again, is with dairy, just like I said, so often it's not the best quality of dairy. Often we're talking about like cheddar, kind of like cheddar cheese from the shop. That's nicely wrapped in a lot of plastic. Obviously, dairy is quite high in fat, and fat is I wouldn't put any plastic on something that's quite fatty, because obviously that means that some of those endocrine disruptors that we talked about can travel into the food. Same thing as when you're like reheating things in the microwave. I would say just don't store things in plastic. Don't buy anything that's stored in plastic. But with so you really want to look at the quality uh, of the dairy, because of if you're choosing organic, you are more likely to have less exposure to those antibiotics, additional hormones that the cow has been injected with or given to. So it will end up in the milk, and therefore in the cheese that you're consuming. So I think decreasing the exposure to these hormones, again, like we said, with the endocrine disruptors is key. With regards to eggs, I don't personally have a problem with eggs. I think they're great. But again, I always say you want to vary your source of protein. So I know people say, you can have eggs every day because there's a lot of myths around cholesterol, saturated fats, which are now being debunked. I think to a certain extent. I think there's still like some considerations for people, but again, it's on like a case-to-case basis. But I think they're a great source of choline, great source of vitamin D. There is vitamin A in them as well. You can also get like omega-3 enriched eggs if you wanted. So chickens that have been fed flax seeds, I believe. So they have a higher amount of omega-3 in them. So yeah, with fish, it's again another
Huge
we open
subject
another
for sure.
big subject. But the thing that we didn't touch on actually was because we talked about like all the main vitamins, B vitamins, iron, vitamin D. Omega-3 is another one, or something that vegans could be at risk of being deficient of, together with iodine. And they're both really important because iodine is essential for thyroid function, and we want good amounts of it for the thyroid to work optimally. And with regards to the omega-3, they are anti-inflammatory, and through the vegan diet, we would, so eating things like chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, you'll be eating quite a lot of alpha-linolenic acid, so your LA, which is the precursor to the form that the body can actually use, which is the DHA and the APA. So, which is often the reason why vegans have suboptimal levels of some of these nutrients. They might be intaking the precursor form, but there's a whole needs of processes that need to happen for the body to be able to utilize those nutrients. That goes for your omega-3, which you can find as EPA and DHA in algae.
Never know really how to pronounce it. I try and skim over that one.
So yeah, you can take it with that, but it wouldn't be the same as if you were taking it through chia or like flax oil or things like that. I actually read the stats earlier. I think it's so about 5% of ALA, which is the precursor form, is converted to the EPA, while less than 0.5% is converted to DHA. And when we're growing a baby, DHA is essential for the brain development and the cognition development of the baby. So we really want to be taking enough of that. And it just doesn't seem like it is possible. You should be eating like a lot of seaweed to be able to make up for that.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, really, really interesting. And again, just highlights the need for anyone following a vegan diet to supplement sufficiently. But knowing as well that everyone's different. And so everyone is going to need a very specific and unique amount. So it's not what I always advise against people doing is just going online or reading a specific article, for example, and just saying, oh, well, vegans need X, Y, Z. It's like, well, what do you need?
Yeah.
Because again, everyone's so different.
Yeah, absolutely. is, I mean, a lot of it is down to our genes as well. So that becomes really, really individualized, and that's why we can't just make our own decision based on something that's working for someone else. I think a lot of the time it's just suck it and see, like try and test it for yourself. Um, but if you feel like being on a vegan diet is, the benefit of it is kind of like running out, where you don't feel that energy anymore, and you know your hair is falling out, your nails are becoming brittle.
Mm.
I think listen to your body and just consider it. Have maybe some blood tests done, and trial it. Like if you feel that including some animal products is having a major effect, like is upon it, like reintroducing some animal products, you see a benefit and a shift in energy and all of these other symptoms, then maybe it's a sign to move towards a more varied way of eating.
Yeah, I know that from my own personal experience, when I went, I was veggie for a long time, and then and that was fine. It was fine. And then I went vegan, and my health quickly demised. You know, I really wasn't in a good, it was one of the sickest that I think I've ever been. My immune function was just on the floor. And this wasn't by any stretch me not doing the vegan diet correctly, you know, with obviously my mum being a nutritional therapist. I was very acutely aware of what it was that I needed to be able to healthily sustain health within that vegan parameter. But it was like chalk and cheese. It was insane. And I was doing bone broths, you know, as a support to try and see if that helped. And it helped a little bit. It didn't help enough. And then I started to weave in again meat products. And very, very quickly my health shifted back. And it was, as I said, the stark correlation between the two was just huge. And that's why I'm such an advocate now for, whilst I'm pro-choice, it's recognizing, reflecting on what your body actually needs to be in good health. And if your body is saying to you, I need this meat, or I need these meat-based products, and because you'll probably crave them as well. Like if your body needs them, you typically crave them. And it's just being really mindful about that. And then obviously if there are those more ethical decisions that come into it, it's trying to balance what it is that your body needs alongside your more ethical considerations, because you know you have to do what works for the both for you, your health and your values. But yeah, it's just being mindful of your health and yourself and what it is that you need. And now I don't eat that much meat, but what I do make sure I do is check in with myself. And if my energy is on the floor, I'll make sure that I have some meat at that point, and it quickly rectifies itself for the following day. I could very well supplement. I hate taking supplements. And so I use meat as my supplement. And it seems to work really well.
Yeah, I think if you can get it in a form that is whole food based, that your body recognizes, why not? Because I mean, we see this, like folate is the classic example, where it's people that don't know will often, you know, get prescribed or just get a prenatal that's got this form of folate, which is folic acid, which is synthetic. The body doesn't really know what to do with it. And a lot of us, I think is around 90% of women have a genetic polymorphism that impairs the conversion of folic acid to the metal folate form, which is what the body uses. So there are all these like micro steps. It's the same for vitamin A, it's the same for the omega-3, that ALA to EPA, DHA conversion. So it's really like you can do genetic testing if you want. I think is, you know, trialing with varying your diet, introducing foods that maybe you haven't eaten in a while, and see how your body responds is probably the best test you can do. Yeah, I think as nature intended, you know. And I come, as I say, like as someone that's just about like just reintroducing meat now. So I hear all your ethical considerations and environmental, but is really consider what's good for you or what you need at this season of your life.
Yeah, I
It doesn't,
really like that.
yeah, it doesn't have to be forever. You know, you can vary the way you eat across the seasons. I just think if you're in this preconception era of your life, it's worth considering.
Yeah. Fantastic. And what I would say on that note is that, again, because everyone is different and you are wanting to explore that in a little more detail, then certainly working with someone to help guide you through that is going to be really important. As I said, trial and error is great, but if you want to look at your unique picture of health and kind of pick to pieces what it is that you uniquely need, then working with someone that can do those functional tests and then go on and prescribe nutritional support or supplementation, depending on your ethics and values and life choices about the way that you want that preconception care to be formed, is going to be really important because you get so much conflicting information online.
Oh yeah, I honestly polarize the opposites. Yeah.
Great. So if anyone has any questions, by all means, feel free to drop them in the chat. I think we lost a couple of people along the way, but it will, as I said, it will be recorded, this talk. So I'm going to be sending it through to you in the next couple of days. Can't promise anything with tech and clinic stuff, but we shall see. Hopefully get it to you sooner rather than later. And if in the meantime you have any further questions, by all means, feel free to drop us an email, as that will be the best way to get us. And hopefully we can support you with what it is that you need at that point.
Just to acknowledge, we did receive a question which asked, saying about women moving from vegan to then this ancestral way of eating raw milk, organic meats, organs, fish, eggs. And she was wondering whether it's possible to be mostly vegan and confident, both mother and baby. I hope we answered this by now. I think we did. But yeah, if you, for any reason, still have doubts on it and would like a better chat, just let us know and we'll give you a more in-depth answer.
Grand. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And if you have a particular burning subject that you'd like us to address next month, again, just let us know, and we'll tailor the topic accordingly. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And Ilaria, I'll see you in clinic tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank
Everyone.
you. Bye. Bye-bye.